Welcome to the Center for Social Entrepreneurship's Friday Speaker Series. Our speaker today is Chris Howell, an alum from 2004.5. He runs Vermont Farm Tours, a small culinary tour outfit offering guided tours by car or bike, cheese-making workshops, and on-farm events. Vermont Farm Tours aims to involve both local interest in Vermont's agricultural story and more broadly to explore place through food. In 2010, Chris received the Wild Gift Fellowship to launch his business, a 16-month program supporting better world entrepreneurs. Chris is currently the Vice President of Slow Food Vermont and co-chairs of Farm to Plate's Consumer Education and Marketing Working Group and Agritourism Force. First, we'll hear from Chris, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. Thank you, Chris, for coming to speak today. Please join me in welcoming Chris.
So I'll just let some pictures of what I do roll behind me as I talk. And so I graduated 4.5 and was pretty involved in the college farm when I was here. And to this day, all the different farmers that we worked with to kind of help us figure out how to grow food are some of the community that I still connect most strongly with. And one of the things that brings me back to Addison County, I live about an hour north of here in Winooski, and in 2009 started Vermont Farm Tours as just a way to both have my own business and also allow me to pursue my passion, which is connecting the place through food and farms. I think that, as a traveler myself and as a visitor to Vermont, when you eat real food with the person who made it on the soil that it comes from, you create a lasting connection, a strong memory, and a really strong marketing opportunity for the producer. So I hope to, give people the opportunity, both visitors and Vermonters, to meet some of the farmers, winemakers, bakers, food producers that define Vermont. For me, the story of Vermont is told best through food. I just love being able to take people to a farm, introduce them to someone that's got a real story to share, somebody who has a strong connection with the land, and also probably an interesting path to arriving there. And so I'll talk a little bit about the history of agritourism in Vermont and agritourism within the context of the tour economy in general in the state. But mostly I'll kind of just sort of tell my own story and the path to Vermont Farm Tours, and I'll share a few resources that, a few organizations that I work with that I'd love to sort of share with you that might be something that you could tap into as well. Before we start, how many people in here are, interested in starting your own venture, organization, business, maybe at some point in your life? How many people have a business or an organization that they already run? Cool. So I definitely didn't, set out with the intent of starting a culinary tour business. Even, months before writing my business plan, the whole idea of a culinary tour outfit wasn't something that was entirely on my radar screen. It was, sitting down in the kitchen of a few different farmer friends and saying, I'm really interested in food and farms, and I want to get people there and have this be a conversation, and I want to, change the way we think about food one person at a time. And, this idea certainly evolved. And agritourism in general is not a new concept by any means. Even in Vermont in the late 1800s, the then, who was kind of the equivalent of the Secretary of Agriculture, Victor Spear, this is in the 1890s, said that the summer border is perhaps the most profitable crop the state has. And, while agriculture and local food is certainly booming in the state, tourism is one of our most vital industries. While agritourism in Vermont accounts, depending on what data you look at, between $10 and $30 million. The tour economy in Vermont is $2.4 billion. So it's a pretty huge industry that continues to grow. Agritourism, by that I mean, when you go to a farmer's market, when you go and buy food directly from a farmer, not just going to a corn maze or, going to a petting zoo, but also an on-farm dinner or even a wedding, I'd call that agritourism, is growing at, somewhere between 10 and 15% per year. So it's, a small portion of our, of our tour economy, but it is a pretty quickly growing one, probably because of the sort of trend in growing awareness and the story behind our food and that desire to connect a little bit more deeply with the food that we're eating. In Vermont, the state has a Department of Agriculture and Department of Tourism and Marketing, and over the last couple decades, there's been, some movement to, connecting the agricultural folks to the tour industry and the marketing folks. And this is happening right now in a really marvelous way through Farm to Plate. Has anyone heard of Farm to Plate before? Awesome. So, real briefly, it's a statewide network of businesses, policymakers, educational institutions, healthcare, you name it. Everyone's at the table helping to, envision the future of our food system in Vermont. And there's a number of working groups. I work with the Consumer Education and Marketing Working Group. Within that, there's the Agritourism Task Force. And right now, the Agency of Agriculture and the Department of Tourism and Marketing are working together in a pretty extraordinary way to, both develop, farm income, making sure that farming is something that's profitable, because that's the way that we'll, maintain this agrarian landscape in Vermont, is profitable farms with authentic experiences, so that, an on-farm dinner or, a wedding on a farm, or even, just like what I do, a small group of people visiting a cheesemaker, is a pretty robust and high quality experience. So doing a lot of technical assistance with farms, helping farmers learn about hospitality, especially learn about marketing and advertising. And the resources are really pouring into that right now. So I think that while Vermont has a very authentic agritourism industry, we're going to see it professionalize, I think, in the next 10 years, where farms that choose to receive visitors are, both farmers and hospitality professionals. Right now, the niche that I serve is the farm that wants to tell their story, that wants to have visitors, but doesn't necessarily have the staff or that hospitality training to be able to, do it well or to do it consistently. I'm able to work with the farmer and say, we're going to be here between 10 and noon. There's 30 people coming. They're from the Boston area, and they're really psyched on cheese. So make sure to tell them where they can buy your cheese in Boston. And this is how we're going to choreograph the visit. And so I'm able to bring a little bit of, that hospitality background and a lot of the planning, take that off the farmer's plate. But, ultimately, I think that, in 10 years, there's going to be the majority of farms that have had that hospitality training, that are able to receive visitors, that are going to be able to do those events and on-farm dinners, and, the percentage of income coming from, that summer border or that visitor is going to increase a lot. Vermont's ag industry is and was dominated by dairy. It's about 65% of our ag economy are dairy farms. When you're driving around and you see this rundown barn and cows out grazing, and it looks kind of quaint, that might be a $1 million business. It might be a $5 million business. These are some of the bigger businesses here in Madison County, are these dairy farms sprinkled around, and they're the main drivers in Vermont's ag industry. So, something that I try to do is to share the story both of the, new goat, farmer that's making an artisan cheese, and also the traditional dairy farm. And something that dairies are doing more and more now is figuring out how to add value. A conventional dairy farm is tied to, the global commodity price of the milk. A farmer here in Addison County doesn't have too much control over the price that they're selling their milk for, and their feed costs, their input costs are fixed, while the price of milk is on a roller coaster ride, owing to factors far beyond Vermont. And you'll see a lot of farmers turning to cheese or events or even farm stays as a way to balance out that huge fluctuation that they see. A great, one of the very first people that said, okay, I have this traditional dairy, I'm going to start bringing visitors to my farm. Beth Kennett, down in Rochester, Vermont, maybe about 45 minutes south of here, started a farm stay 30 years ago. And most of her dairy farming colleagues thought she was crazy, bringing visitors from Boston, New York City, to this small dairy farm in Rochester. And she stuck with it. And this was at a time when the Agency of Agriculture really didn't see much value in visitors on the farm, when dairy was the end-all be-all. Fast forward 30 years from now, and we have a state task force that's focused on agritourism, that's trying to work with farmers to meet them where they're at in terms of technical assistance and doing the different training, whether that's on insurance or how to host a wedding. And I guess where I came to it was even before I got to Middlebury, I loved food, and I loved to have my hands in the dirt. I certainly didn't want to be a farmer. My dad was a carpenter, my mom was a teacher, and I was always drawn to physical work, but the thought of farming really intimidated me. The idea of being so tied to a place, especially coming from Middlebury, where I'd been exposed to all these amazing students from around the world, wanted to visit them and wanted to travel and explore and have have a few more options than having to milk cows every day. And I graduated, and I'd always been an entrepreneur. I applied to like 10 fellowships, knowing that I didn't really want to have a real job. Didn't get a single fellowship, and it was a pretty great wake-up call. And ended up farming with my dad. He retired from carpentry, and we started a 5-acre farm in New Hampshire. I put in wine grapes and built greenhouses and did the season extension stuff, and he did fruit and a veggie CSA. Within about 8 months of working in rural New Hampshire with my dad, I realized that the sort of social life and also the sort of power structure wasn't for me. I went from social Middlebury College, where I could go and sit down for 2 hours and have lunch with 10 different friends, to my dad and I in parsnips at night, and it was a little bit too much of a change, and so I thankfully thanks to my parents, went and worked on farms in Italy and France and Spain, just to try to kind of both, it was a holding pattern. I was applying for jobs in Vermont, and also just to see different sort of business models and farm models. I worked for a cheesemaker, worked for a winemaker, worked for olive harvest in Italy, and that's where I got exposed to this this different model of tourism, where there'd be a van, with a guy driving a van around to some town in Tuscany, and he'd take guests from Japan and Germany to visit his friend the cheesemaker in some town north of Florence, where that town is known for a certain cheese. And the experience of that part of Italy was meeting the guy that made the cheese, tasting it in his cave, and forever after, the smell of that cheese, when you buy that, have it anywhere else in the world, you're transported back to that cheese cave, and you remember the experience of meeting that guy, and his real passion, his multi-generational passion for that place, and why that place is, there. It's because it has a certain microclimate that supports a certain mold that grows in his cave, and nowhere else could you make that cheese. And that really blew my mind, how people were rooted to place through food. And thought to myself, gosh, Vermont's got a very similar agricultural landscape to where I was in Tuscany. There's farms close enough together with people that are truly rooted in the dirt they're walking on, that have an incredible story to tell. And this idea sort of sat in me for a while, and I got a real job in Burlington, Vermont, doing the sort of general contracting for a 50-acre property, turning it into a summer camp, and getting to work with an awesome mentoring organization, Dream Program. Anyone know Dream here at Middlebury? So Camp Dream up in Fletcher, Vermont was just woods back in 2005, and we brought in water and put in a sewer system and worked through Act 250 and built tree houses and cabins, and it was an awesome job, and we turned a patch of woods into an edible landscape that the kids could engage. But at the end of the day, I still really wanted to have my own business, and I really wanted to find a way to work more directly with farmers. When I finished up working for Dream Program, I started my own carpentry outfit, which to this day is the most money I've ever made per hour doing carpentry, and camped out on the sites we were working on and didn't spend any money, and just saved enough money to cut loose for a couple of years while I started Farm Tours. And the idea was mostly get people on farms to eat food with the person who made it. And I sat down and we were thinking about like a CSA model for dinners, where you'd subscribe to a dinner and have dinner on a farm every week or every month. And realized quickly through talking to people in the restaurant business that I did not want to be in the food service business. That was not my calling or passion, and sort of came back around to this model that I saw when I was working in Italy, where it's just a small tour outfit where somebody's connecting visitors to his friends through through small group tours, and that's sort of what I put together, business planning, and didn't have too much experience in the hospitality business, didn't have any training in the tour business, hadn't formally studied business. I still haven't gone to grad school. It's probably somewhere on my horizon, but what I did have was a pretty solid connection with a number of farmers here in Madison County through starting the Middlebury College Farm, and went to friends of mine and said, hey, would you be up for having visitors? And that's where it started, was with just a handful of farmers that I knew. And what I learned over the few years was that it has to really be worthwhile for the farmer or the food producer that we're visiting. It has to be someone, I pay them when we visit them, but it has to be someone that derives a few different benefits from seeing a group of tourists. They have to drive a marketing benefit, so a vineyard or a cheesemaker or a brewer that sells product, wherever the customers are coming from. When you meet that person and you connect personally with them, you're going to remember that forever, and you're going to seek out their product. And like I was saying, when you buy, Carlton Yoder's cheese from Champlain Valley Creamery, and you taste that cheese and you smell it, you're back there in his cave, you remember his personality, and that's something that you can't do on Facebook. You can't do in a print ad. It's only possible possible, to create this multi-sensory connection with place and with a person by really being there. And that's that's a powerful experience for the visitor, and it's also probably the best kind of marketing you can do. And so the producer has to drive that marketing benefit. And they also have to be like a good storyteller and a charismatic host, someone who is smiling when visitors come, because they just enjoy that energy, and they have either a farm mission or a personal mission of education. And it might be 10 to 50 people at a time, but when you go and see just how someone came to farming and what they're doing and why they're doing it, it changes how you think about food when you're in the grocery store or when you're at the farmer's market. And it's not going to be a sea change. People aren't going to be going out and switching over to buying local food exclusively, but it will change the value you put on food, and maybe spend a little bit more care and attention with the food you buy. And it's not something that I harp on, but it's certainly this important result for what I do is changing the way people engage food. And I think when you're able to connect place and people through food, it changes the food system. That's the sort of core premise of what I do. Built on hopefully good hospitality and good communication and really solid business. So a number of organizations have kind of helped me out along the way. The reason I was in Italy was through Slow Food. I worked in Ra, near Alba, Italy, the northwestern part of Italy, for a little while for Slow Food. And Slow Food Vermont is still an organization that I worked with. If anyone here is got too much time on their hands, start a Slow Food Vermont student chapter here. There's a really strong chapter up at UVM, but I would love to see one here at Middlebury. So look up Slow Food. It's an awesome organization devoted to good, clean, and fair food. So connecting place, people, and the environment. Like I mentioned before, Farm to Plate is a statewide network that you as a student or an administrator or a professor can engage. It's something that is open to you, and there's a seat at that table. It's a pretty awesome space where I get to work with the Commissioner of Tourism in Vermont on a regular basis. I get to work with the Secretary of Agriculture. At our annual retreat, we play ping pong together and play games in the pool. It's this cool community where something that is pretty unique in Vermont. It's a small place, and people just appreciate working together. And the Farm to Plate network is all different sort of work backgrounds and across the political spectrum. It's pretty neat to have this sort of entrance into politics and food policy on a very boots on the ground, tangible, let's make progress together sort of way. So I'd highly recommend looking into that and getting involved there if you're at all interested in food systems work. The final resource that I'll mention is Wild Gift, a fellowship that supported me in 2009 when I was starting Vermont Farm Tours. It's a nonprofit based in Idaho called Wild Gift. And are you applying for it?
I'm from Idaho.
So it's based in Sun Valley, and it's a 16-month fellowship that provides a 1-month deep wilderness experience where entrepreneurs ages 21 to 35 are able to work on their venture without a cell phone, with mentors of all different ages. So you're out in the backcountry working on your pitch, working on HR, learning about management, work-life balance, and mentors, even the former CFO of Apple, comes out to a yurt in the backcountry to talk about, financial structure of your organization. And it's just a pretty awesome opportunity to both connect with a wild place and unplug a little bit, but also to focus on you and the people that you're with. It's a small group, 4 or 5 people at a time. And for me, it was certainly a very powerful experience to be able to root this new venture of mine in the wilds of Idaho and connect with a pretty strong community of entrepreneurs was a true gift. And so I still work with Wild Gift and just can't say enough good things about it. It's just a very diverse group of people that at the heart just enjoy the wilderness and see that as an important part of doing business. So I'll wrap it up there and open it up to questions. Have we spun around in the slideshow? Yeah. I tried to set it up so that it would keep pace with my talk, but how are we doing on time?
We have 25 more minutes.
We have 25 more minutes? Perfect. So I'll open it up to conversation. I also have a couple videos of some of the different farms I work with that I'd be happy to show if you want to connect in that way. But before we do that, any questions? Mm-hmm.
When you first went out to approach farms in Vermont, did any of the farmers meet with great skepticism? It was sort of like, really, what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think it was my own skepticism, and I was a little bit afraid of being this mid-grad, trying to create some business on the backs of farmers. That's this doubt I had in my own head that was absolutely not true. It's really what I found was, a lot of the friends that I had in Addison County were really supportive in the beginning. Some of them weren't good storytellers, some of them weren't good hosts, and it was just having that conversation, like, hey, this isn't a good fit, and it's not like we're not friends anymore, but it just wasn't, they weren't benefiting enough, and they also weren't a hospitality person. You gotta have that piece of things, and so. I think it was my own skepticism. I wouldn't say like agritourism in Vermont has changed that much, but now it's probably 30 or 40 farmers call me every year saying we'd love to get into this. Can you bring guests to us? And what I always say is, where's our like big huge hotel or resort where all the people are going to come from? I like to think I'm pretty good at marketing, but I can't just snap my fingers and make a group of 30 people appear, every day. And yeah.
The second part of that question is that the farmers who are participating, do they have liability issues to worry about? So is it sort of
so that's
an extra on the side?
So that's another piece of things that I provide. So my insurance covers my guests when they're on the farm, whether they're on a bike tour, or whether we're doing an on-farm dinner or a wedding or something like that. So, if they don't have that type of insurance, that's fine. Yeah. But a lot of the farms I work with do their own events and still have that insurance. Luckily, it's never come up to see whose insurance covers it when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go to you and then you.
Just a question. Have you included on your trip visiting digesters?
So I do some industry trips. So like the New England Dairy Promotion Board, I've done stuff with them, with USDA, and we will go to like Blue Spruce Farm, and that's a piece of the conversation around, like waste management and turning that into an asset. Depending on the group, we'll tune that in. On my regular farm tour with tourists, we're not talking about digesters. We're more talking about, the Vermont landscape and how, Act 250, Vermont Land Trust, Agrimark, which is Cabot, have such a huge impact on, why Vermont looks the way it does. We're talking about soils and why soil is so important to grass, which is important to milk, which is important to cheese, and sort of telling the story of food. So yes, but not on a regular basis.
Well, the reason I ask is because last year I went to a documentary that a student had made on the digesters, and I didn't know anything about it. And I come to learn that Vermont is #1 in the whole country in the number of just because they produce, and are building more as we speak. So the idea of, what is unique to Vermont's agriculture that's sustainable in an environmental way, it just seems like why more and more people would come to you, because there's something, really progressive about
Yeah, and
Vermont.
that sort of speaks to another interesting thing about like who my customers are and why people would do, a tour with me. It's a leap of faith. Just like go out in the car with some guy you haven't met before. Like you can read TripAdvisor and other people will vouch for me, but like, it is a bit of a leap of faith to spend your day with someone, go to the farms. And really, it's people that want a unique Vermont experience, not necessarily people that are interested in the environmental aspect or, foodies. It's people that, want to do something with their parents or just want to spend a day in a special way. And, that really surprised me. And I thought I could sort of hone in and really target the people that are interested in the environmental stuff or that are really interested in food or wine or cheese. And that exists to a small extent, but I'd say that of the tourists that I work with, those really targeted groups are probably just 10% of who I work with. Yeah.
My question is sort of along the lines of who are targeting.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had any programs in place for maybe people who couldn't really access these artisan products normally, or maybe school groups, or I saw that you had something at the Middlebury Agritourism.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you are you really only targeting the sort of boutique niche subset of the
Yeah, so I should back up a little bit and just sort of frame my business. So there's three parts of the business. One are these private tours, which are $125 a person for a full day, and you spend 6 to 8 hours visiting 3 farms, having lunch at a farm. Those folks are mostly visitors, mostly from the Northeast. And then another part of the business are what I call corporate or institutional tours. So I work with meeting and event planners, wedding planners, to work with anyone from like Subaru dealers in New England to 7th generation. Might have a corporate retreat, they might have a conference, and I'll take the partners of the people, or it might be a programmatic element of the conference like the USDA. And so there's the private tours, the institutional tours, and then I do my own events. So like that bike tour at Pine Island Farm was the tour to go, and we went and did a bike ride, came back for a goat roast and dinner in the barn right above the goats, one of which we were eating. So that's, so those are the three parts of the business. I don't seek out, groups that might not have access to that type of experience otherwise. And I would say, what the other part of that is like how is that business part of the community, and what is it doing beyond just making money, and a big part of that, like Tour to Goat, was let's get like the New American community, mostly Nepalis, together with like the hardcore biking, cycling folks, and let's do a goat roast and put them in a barn together and have music and just have a fun time, and just what something I'm personally interested in is sort of having different groups of people that all live in the Burlington area collide a little bit around food. I think that sitting around a table together is a pretty good way to get to know your neighbors, and that's something that I try to do. But like, am I working a lot with school groups? Not so much. Mostly because organizations like Shelburne Farms are so good at that. They have this awesome curriculum, and what they're able to offer it for is funded by grants, and so it's something that I probably work with 4 or 5 school groups a year, just friends who are teachers, saying like, hey Chris, can we like go do this thing with you? And I'm like, yeah, let's make it happen. But it's not really part of my business. I get that, I feed that part of myself, I think, through a lot of other hats that I wear, like aside from Farm to Plate and Slow Food and Wild Gift, I also work with a number of community gardens in Burlington, and using those as spaces to get, the neighborhood and the Old North End together, out gardening together and doing events and stuff there. I think that's probably a lot to do with, Middlebury, being able to wear a lot of hats and have your finger in a lot of pots, and because, speaking for myself, there's just so many things that I'm personally interested in, and having my own business is a really good way to satisfy a few of those. But there's a lot of other stuff that I like doing too that doesn't quite fit within, supporting myself financially at the end of the day. Yeah.
I was wondering if you might be able to touch a little bit on your the beginning phases and then your growth and any of the challenges you faced and how you overcame those and what you learned.
Great question. Yeah. So it was, so I started in 2009. I'm going to my 6th year, and the business is me, a hired marketing person, and 2 or 3 seasonal guides. Someone help with bike tours and wine tours. For my big events, the big events will usually benefit a local nonprofit, and there's like 20 or 30 volunteers that will come to help out with those. And so it's a micro business, and it just supports me. And initially, I had this goal of a scalable, enterprise, different hubs around the state or even the region. And what I realized was 2 things. Is that as I was building this business, I was building it around me and my personal connections, and without too much thought, I built something that wasn't scalable. This is Vermont Farm Tours. I might be able to maybe in 10 years pass along to somebody else, but if I looked at my balance sheet, I wouldn't buy my business right now. And so sort of to get back to your question, I went from this vision of this sort of big scalable thing to I absolutely love what I do, and what I do sustains me financially. I am thinking about having a family at some point, and is it going to sustain a family? Maybe not. I'm still growing at like 10 to 15% per year, but I do worry a little bit about that. And I think some of the bigger challenges that I faced were sort of, for me, this is its own thing, is sort of coming to terms with the fact that this business I chose was more, you could call it like a lifestyle business. It was something that allows me free time in the winter to travel and work with other organizations. It allows me to stay connected to a community. That is why I live in Vermont, and that sustains me. And it's something that that really matters. It really matters to me, and that's the why of it. At the same time, I try to tell myself, when I'm thinking about taking on a new partnership or a new part of the business, does it really make sense? And sometimes I say no, and I do it anyway. Certain things are starting to bubble up. I started these cocktail walks in Burlington, and visit 3 restaurants. The distiller, a Vermont distiller, comes and is featured on each walk, and they're able to tell their story. It's my sort of way of getting to work with the distilled spirits industry in Vermont and starting to tell this story around how distilled spirits have this opportunity to be a real Vermont product. You can grow the grain that you can make spirits with, whereas beer, you're never going to be able to grow, all of the ingredients to satisfy the Vermont, beer industry. But distilled spirits, you can can start talking about terroir, and you can start having this be an industry that really supports farmers, grain growers. And so, this whole cocktail walk thing is blown up, and it's going to spin off into its own business. It really does make sense. It's something that could be sold, and it's doing really well. But also at the end of the day, it's my way of kind of twisting the arm of the distilled spirits industry by sort of saying the story over and over and over again about how distilled spirits come from Vermont, and that a real true Vermont spirit is grown here, and it's cool, and it's something that I hired a PR person to help me tell this story, and got it in these big national magazines, and it's neat to see this thing sort of working, both on a sort of a mission level and then on a financial level too. But for farm tours, I'd say it's mostly just sustaining me and my own lifestyle right now. We'll go you in the back and then front.
I remember you mentioned at the beginning that the tourism industry in Vermont is pretty big. And so I was wondering if you have, if there's other companies in Vermont that are doing very similar thing to you, and are they the ones that are scaling up that? Because you were saying that you think that 10 years time it's going to be huge, but you're probably not going to be doing it anymore.
Yeah, so there are lots and lots of other tour companies that are doing food and farm tours as part of what they do. There's Burlington Brew Tours, there's Sugar Tours, there's probably about 6 or 8 tour companies that are in the same vein as me, meaning that there's a guide that works directly with a group of people. Other models are, you subcontract with a big, tour company and you provide their service and they sell it. But in the sort of same sort of genre of business that I am, I'd say there's probably 6 or 8 other people. And I think the thing that sets me apart is I take on logistical challenges that other tour companies wouldn't. I want to go visit cheesemakers that are making the very best cheese, and some of those cheesemakers have kids that have swimming practice and soccer practice, and when I set up a cheese, tomorrow I'm doing a cheese tour in Middlebury, and Carl Yoder, who makes Champlain Valley Creamery cheese right here in Middlebury, it's his kid's birthday, and he's like, sorry Chris, we can't do it. But luckily I have 4 other cheesemakers that I work with in the area, so I call them up. And from a business standpoint, it's a terrible idea to have this much sort of logistics for every tour. And could I streamline it? Yeah. At the same time, I enjoy just making those phone calls, talking about family life, and sort of making it work. Did I answer your question? I think I spiraled out
I
there.
guess so. And I guess a second part to it is, if they already existed and you knew that this is something you're interested in, why you decided to do it your own way versus kind of joining in with someone who's already doing it and getting involved in that way.
Yeah, the reason I did my own thing was because I didn't want to have a boss. And so there's, I partner with a number of hotels for packages, and, I love partnerships, but, the other option was, and I couldn't have gotten myself hired by another tour company. I had no experience in this, and, it's also something that one of my exits could be to, sort of take Vermont Farm Tours and put it under the umbrella of another tour company. One thing that it's really strong in is it's well branded and pretty well connected because of Farm to Plate. I work with the players in agriculture and tourism in the state, and they know about me, and so that's really helpful. I get more media attention that way, and then I also get business that way. But the reason that I didn't start working for someone else is because I couldn't get hired, I'm sure, and because I just wanted to make my own thing. Yeah.
Can you talk more about the Wild Gift Fellowship and what you're doing with them now and what the other elements of the fellowship are besides the wilderness retreat?
Yeah, so it's a 16-month fellowship. You get a month in the wilderness where mentors are brought in, and you'll have topics of conversation. The pitch is one. A number of fellows this year were going to be raising capital, and so it's both, like Hidden Valley, Idaho is a place where there's a lot of entrepreneurship there and people who are just interested in supporting people that are going to make a difference in the world in addition to making a lot of money. And so it's a good community to get plugged into. Wild Gift helps make that happen. And then after the trek, you receive a mentor that's usually specific to your industry. And then you meet with a mentor, hopefully on a weekly basis. And then you have a bookend wilderness experience where other fellows get together, and there's a monthly, not a monthly, a yearly alumni reunion out in Sun Valley where the different fellows can get together. So it's a good mentoring program. You get $10,000, but really the core of it is this wilderness experience that allows you to totally unplug and focus on what you're doing for 3 weeks, which is unusual. Right now, if I want to develop a new project, I can maybe carve out an afternoon to really start thinking about that and sort of working it through, and to have 3 weeks to develop that is golden. Yeah.
Maybe we have time for like one more question, one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was funny you mentioned that, is the Kennett family?
Yeah, Beth Kennett.
Yeah, so my first Vermont experience was actually staying in their farm when I was 5.
No kidding.
So I was wondering, and we got to learn, we got to milk the cows and
Yeah.
see if they before we were. I was just wondering if you've tried to stay connected with any similar bed and breakfast
Yeah.
farms. Not obviously you're a tour company, but have you tried to?
In the bed and breakfast that I work with the most is Trevin Farms. They're in Sudbury, and they have goats, chickens, and horses. They have a bed and breakfast. I think they have just 4 rooms, so it's not a huge operation. And they make cheese for their guests. So tomorrow, that's where we're gonna have lunch. And they're just so passionate about their animals, and it's something pretty cool to be able to be there. It's also like kidding season just happened. There's a lot of baby goats around. Hopefully it'll be something kind of like your experience where you're able to connect with Beth and with the cows and have it be something that you're gonna remember for the rest of your life. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll hang out here for a little bit.
Thank you, Chris, for coming and speaking, and thank you for everyone for attending. So, as Chris said, he'll be here if you have any questions. And next Friday, we have another speaker, and our final one is the Friday after that. So we hope to see you there.